Welcome and thank you for tuning in to our third annual December 1st Tuesday For Thoughts event. For those of you who don't know, my name is Daniel Senner and I am the Community Conservation Coordinator for the Methow Conservancy. Our organization is a nonprofit land trust and community conservation organization who seeks to inspire people to care for the land of the Methow Valley. Tonight is special because we get to hear the thoughts of 5 talented people who care deeply for the land of the Methow Valley. But before we get to the main event, I would just like to start off the night with an acknowledgement, a welcome, and an introduction. First, I would like to acknowledge that the Methow Conservancy as a land trust and community conservation organization, we seek to protect and steward the land that for time immemorial was cared for by members of the Methow tribe. This is their homeland. We recognize we must do more to build better relationships and acknowledge our past with our Methow tribe descendants. They still live and care for the land in this valley. And it is out of love and belief in the Methow Valley and its diverse communities that the Methow Conservancy hosts events such as this one. We put on a variety of both in-person and virtual events throughout the year. Each event has the goal of expanding individual knowledge, fostering community, and identifying areas for collective action. For those of you in the audience who may not be connected with the Methow Conservancy or are new to the Methow Valley, I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about the Methow Valley, our events, or what we do, I encourage you to reach out to me personally at daniel@methowconservancy.org. Even though tonight we are still on Zoom and not in the barn, a lot has changed over the, a lot has changed since our last For Thoughts event 12 months ago. To help us remember the amazing things that have happened in between Zoom links, I would like to call up to the stage Executive Director of the Methow Conservancy, Jason Paulson. Welcome, Jason.
Great, thanks, Daniel. And thank you to everyone for tuning in this evening. I have to say, there is just no substitute for standing on the stage in the barn and looking out upon 350 of you all, like we used to do for this program. And I sure hope that next year we're able to gather together again in that format for Thoughts. But it makes me really grateful that you are willing to tune in and be a part of making this event a success via Zoom tonight. So thank you all for being here. I'd also like to start by thanking Daniel and all of the Methow Conservancy staff and our board members, many of whom are online with us tonight, for all of their contributions this past year. Working through a pandemic is difficult for everyone, and I'm just exceptionally proud of the work that our organization has been able to advance, even during these challenging times. As those of you who've attended before know, this is my once-a-year opportunity to stand on the stage and reflect a little bit on the past year, and to highlight what I think is important about our work in the community and in conservation here in the Methow. As I think about this past year, I think at the macro level, what I'm proud of is the way that this entire community has stepped up to the challenges that it has faced, and the way our organization has participated and worked in the community, and the ways in which we are creating opportunities out of the challenges that have come our way in 2021. This is an amazing community, and it truly is an honor to have the opportunity to do this work here alongside each of you who call this place home or hope one day to call it home. One of the words that we've heard a lot this year, and Daniel highlighted it, is the word change. It comes up in almost every conversation that I've been a part of. And one of the things I'm exceptionally proud of this year is the work that our staff, and in particular, Julie Grialou on our staff, did to create the State of the Methow Project, to help inform our conversations about change with real data that we can track and use over time into the future. That project helped to catalyze another project that was our Rural Changes course, and several First Tuesday discussions this fall, where you all have come together with us to have community discussions about the forces of change in our community and the ways our community is stepping up to those changes to turn challenges into opportunities. One of the things I think we realize is that change is afoot all across the American West in communities like ours, but not every community is coming together to have those conversations, to identify their values, and then to take action toward protecting those values into the future. And I'm exceptionally proud of the work that we've done to help facilitate those conversations, and grateful for each of you who have taken part in them or who will join us in the conversations to come. So thank you. I'm also exceptionally proud of the capacity that you all provide that has made it possible for the Methow Conservancy to continue to play an active role in the housing discussion in our community, and in particular on the Housing Solutions Network. We recognize that safe and affordable housing, like habitat, is an essential component of a healthy community. We also have been able to facilitate the launch of Methow Bear-Aware, a new collaboration aimed at ensuring that our growing human population is working to minimize conflict with our robust black bear population. And early in 2022, we will be publishing the 3rd edition of the Good Neighbor Handbook as a way to welcome and educate those who are new to our valley and community. And we'll be working to mail that to every new landowner in the valley going forward. We look forward to sharing that with all of you. It would not be right to stand on the stage here this evening and reflect on 2021 without acknowledging the fact that many of us lived through another summer of wildfire in the Methow. I want to pause here this evening to thank all of those who worked so hard to keep our community safe. Ranger Chris Furr and his staff at our local ranger district, the Department of Natural Resources and Okanagan Fire District 6, personnel and volunteers who all work to minimize property damage and keep us safe during this pretty dramatic summer of wildfire and drought here in the Methow. I want to thank each of you on the call tonight for the capacity that you provide that allows us to take a leadership role in the Methow Valley Long-Term Recovery Organization, which also supports Fire Adapted Methow Valley, which is working to ensure that all landowners are inspired to do what they can do to help to make our community more resilient to wildfire into the future. I want to thank as well those of you who joined us at Sun Mountain this fall for a reseeding event out there, putting muscle to the landscape, helping to recover bulldozer lines in and around Sun Mountain Lodge. We've learned that providing people with tangible ways to get out and play a role in the recovery of the landscape is an important part of healing and dealing with the grief that comes from wildfire. And we're grateful for those of you who turned out on a chilly morning and helped to get that work done on some pretty steep slopes up there. And we're excited to monitor your work going into the future. Finally, I also want to encourage each of you to think about your holiday purchasing decisions and to think about ways that you might be able to help support local businesses in our community with your decisions this holiday season. The wildfires quickly fade in our minds once we get snow on the ground, but the impact to small business owners in our community continues. Many have endured multiple challenges through COVID and wildfire, and we can all do an awful lot to support them simply by choosing to make our purchases here in the Methow Valley. So please join us in supporting the small businesses who do so much to support our work here at the Methow Conservancy. Finally, no reflection from an executive director at a land trust would be complete without making reference to the land protection projects that you all make possible here. Over the past year, we advanced work on a project that builds upon a project we completed in 2020 that will result in the protection and conservation of a vast piece of private upland habitat east of Winthrop and Twist. It's land that's important to our mule deer as winter range, and we hope will be the land that one day will be the catalyst for bringing sharp-tailed grouse back to the Methow Valley. We hope to bring the next phase of that project to completion over the next year and look forward to sharing that with you all when the time comes. I also want to call attention to a project that we completed north of Winthrop. We were able to purchase, thanks to the Tina Skull Land Opportunity Fund and support from many of you, we were able to purchase the former Woodward Ranch and ensure that the largest remaining unconserved piece of irrigated farmland above Winthrop in the upper Methow Valley will be permanently protected. And if you read e-news this month, you know we have a process underway to ensure that it continues to be available to agriculturalists in our community into the future. And it's an exciting project for us. It's a visible piece of farmland, and we thank you for all the capacity you provide that help to make that project possible. Lastly, I want to note the Meadowlark Natural Area. This past year, we also succeeded in transferring ownership of the Meadowlark Natural Area to the town of Winthrop, so that the town of Winthrop, its residents and visitors, have a safe and accessible place to go and take a hike that provides unparalleled views of our watershed and is accessible to all ages. And if you haven't been up to the Meadowlark Natural Area, you can find information on our website, and I encourage you to get up there before the snow gets too deep. Finally, within the last 6 months, we were able to respond to a historic opportunity to acquire the former Wagner Ranch property located on the Chewuk north of Winthrop. This property, 328 acres, includes over 1.6 miles of healthy riparian riverfront habitat. We purchased this property with the goal of returning it to the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation to honor the Methow people who have lived in this valley for generations. In conveying this property over the next few months, we hope that the Methow people will once again feel welcome to return to the Methow Valley and to be able to take part both in our community and their natural gathering and harvesting on this amazing piece of wildlife habitat. We look forward to sharing more details on that project in the coming year as we complete the gift, but we're grateful to so many of you who have provided support this year to allow us to respond at what is a historic speed for us to be able to acquire the property and make this opportunity possible. Thursday night, our board will gather and continue the process of looking forward to the year ahead, identifying our priorities, our hopes and dreams for 2022. We'll have to wait until this time next year to come together to know what exactly we are celebrating in 2022. But the one thing we know for certain is that the key ingredient in our success will be each of you, every member of this community who, like our speakers this evening, care deeply and recognize that being a citizen of the Methow requires participation, engagement, and active work to make this the special place that it is. I want to thank you all for the support that you make possible, whether that's financial support or your volunteer time throughout the year, or simply attending programs like these to support our work. We greatly appreciate it. And now, as we gather here this evening, I want to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and introduce to you all Sarah Brooks, Associate Director here at the Methow Conservancy, who is going to serve as your MC for the remainder of the evening. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for loving this valley. And Sarah, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I think Jason secretly likes doing this on Zoom because I can't get on the stage and interrupt him. But I'm so excited for tonight's 4 thoughts. just a little quick introduction to what you are about to experience. It's one of my favorite things all year, I will say. So we have always, in the entire time I've been with the Conservancy, done really great December programs for First Tuesday. And in the past, that has tended to focus on furry mammals. We did things on wolverines and bears and other great creatures. And that always was exciting to the community. And in 2019, way back pre-pandemic, when we were thinking about what's next for a good December program, we wondered what would happen if we turned over the microphone to some of the human perspectives from the Methow Valley. And we came up with this idea of 4 thoughts, which I hope you all are getting the cleverness of it also being like forethought, not just for the number 4 thoughts. The idea was to give 4 diverse people in our community that we respect the microphone and give it to them for roughly 8 minutes. We won't be actually keeping a stopwatch on it, but to prompt them with a broad theme and let them go wherever they were moved with it. So in 2019, our very first forethought speaker appropriately was Mark Miller, who is a descendant of the Methow tribe and a family member of the longest known continuous residents of the Valley. And Mark's words, if you heard them, probably stick with you. I know they will stick with me forever. Mark encouraged us all in his forethought speech to approach our lives here in the Methow with what he called a good heart. I always think of that as capitalized, like a good heart. And as we care for the land and each other, as we reckon with our history, and as we think about what it means to care for our future, he asked us to always carry a good heart. And so it is with a good heart that we come to you tonight. I agree, we could all probably use a great soup dinner in the barn where you're rubbing elbows with everybody and feeling the buzz of the community in the room, but we can't do. But we can continue the tradition of providing space for different perspectives to get us all thinking. And one beautiful thing about Zoom is it lets this be seen by those who can't be here with us tonight, who are far apart, and for those who couldn't be with us in time, being able to watch the recording. So welcome to all. I should note that we hope that over the lifetime of this event, we will be able to hear from a full range of the diversity of this valley. We obviously can't do that entirely each year when we only have 4 speaking slots, but we think tonight's crew adds to that broadening of our perspectives. And if you haven't seen the last 2 years, we have them on recordings on our website, and I encourage you to start, catching up on the library. We're committed to doing this each December. We find it infinitely fascinating. And that means some of you might want to start thinking about what you'll say when Daniel or I call you next year and say, we'd like you to give a forethought. So here's how it's going to work. We asked 4, you'll hear there's a little asterisk next to the 4 this year. We'll get there. Brave community members to reflect tonight on this prompt. What does the Methow Valley mean to me? We do not know what they will say. They have free reign. We have not read or seen their remarks yet, nor have they heard each other's. So just good to know that they don't each know what the other will be saying. We recognize that you may agree or disagree with what you hear tonight. We ask only that you come to this with that good heart and an open mind, and that you see each of these 8-minute reflections as an invitation for all of us to think about what the Methow Valley means to us. All right, so without further ado, let's get on to hearing from the speakers. Remember, these are very brave people. Sharing your thoughts publicly is like right up there, right in the pie chart of most terrifying things you can do. And I think that was before you added in and on Zoom. So before we get started, let's give that silent round of applause for them for just being brave enough to give this a go. And I will introduce our first speaker. So our first thought tonight comes to you from Ashley Lodato. My guess is that most of you will recognize Ashley. You might recognize her from the picture that you find on the back of your Methow Valley News every week. Ashley is the Winthrop columnist. I will say that is more than a gossip column, but actually a really wonderfully written insight into life in the Methow Valley. Or you know her from her long career at Methow Arts, or maybe from her time at Outward Bound. Or you know her as the mom of Wyatt and Lecky, who she has been parenting here in the Methow Valley with John Albright for more than 15 years. Or you've met her on a trail, any trail, because I'm pretty sure Ashley's been on all the trails, backpacking, skiing, running, or that trail of water that we call our rivers. However you know her, whatever way you recognize her, you know that she is the kind of person who cares deeply about community, who volunteers for just about every single thing she has been ever asked to volunteer for, including something like this, and who has this beautiful way of capturing exactly what you may have been thinking in her writing. For these reasons, we asked Ashley to kick off our 2021 Four Thoughts events. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. It's humbling, but also scary to be doing this tonight. So thank you for your time and interest. Sarah just smiled, so I assume you can all hear me and everything's working fine. So seeing everybody tonight when we were all logging on in our Brady Bunch Zoom boxes reminded me of making those appliance box forts. When we were kids, we'd tape together a bunch of cardboard boxes, and at first we'd all be in our own little world, kind of dark and isolated, even though we were right next to all these other kids in boxes. And then we'd cut doors and windows and the light would come in and our boxes were all interconnected. So it can be a little bit like that in this valley, especially if you're new, and especially during COVID, kind of living these parallel but separate lives. But when I think about what the Methow means to me, I think about connections. So it's really easy to be connected to the land here for obvious aesthetic reasons, but also because you can do it on your own terms. You can stroll through the forest, you can ride rolling hills on horseback, or you can kick step up Silver Star. You can stand thigh deep in the river with a fly rod, or read a book on the bank, or tackle Black Canyon on a paddleboard. But connecting to the community and connecting to the people, the path isn't quite as obvious. And what it has entailed for me is figuring out how to open up spaces between the various boxes I found my life taking shape in. So I'm going to read something that I wrote for tonight. One, because I think better when I write, but also because I was just too nervous to improvise it tonight. So here goes. My first visit to the Methow Valley was on a camping trip in the summer of 1977. I arrived a bit like the Jodes arrived in California, tired, dusty, and seeking paradise. At the time, of course, I didn't know what the Methow would end up meaning to me. I was 8 years old. All I knew was that after grinding up from Wenatchee in the bed of a 1970 Dodge one-ton pickup truck, packed shoulder to shoulder with 4 other kids and 2 moms while the dads rode up front, I was glad to have my feet on the ground again. All around me, the Methow unfurled. Light glinted off the river. Rock bands on Flag Mountain radiated shimmering heat. Clouds stippled the ribbon of sky overhead. Wind whispered in the pines. It was almost a cliche, like a movie set of the perfect camping spot. During the day, we kids ran wild while the dads fished or hiked. I have no recollection of what the moms did, but now as a mother myself, I realize they must have been busy with the endless little things moms do to ensure a memorable camping trip for everyone else. At night around a campfire, back in the olden days when we did things like torch up a pile of logs in the middle of summer just for fun, Bob Parlett, upon whose property and with whom we were camped, told us the urban legend of the crazed killer with a hook hand who stalked teenagers making out in parked cars. He told us about Black Hood, the hitchhiker of Black Horse Lake, and the Bermuda Triangle. Over time, the ghost stories became as integral a part of our Methow Valley camping trips as the river, the pines, the sunshine. Just as surely as that killer's hand was hooked on the door handle, we kids were hooked on the Methow. A love affair with the valley was sparked, similar to the ones I'm sure many of you have experienced. But for me, it was a long distance and fickle love affair, when college and the years afterwards took me to different parts of the country, other places to fall in love with. It was only after my husband, John, and I had our first child in 2004, and at the urging of my lifelong friend, Brooke Parlett Lucy, that we began considering putting down roots in the Methow Valley. In 2005, we moved from Maine to the Methow with neither job nor housing. Within days of arriving, we found both. Lucky us, we were home. The scale in the Methow is supersized. It's in your face. The mountains continue their upward thrusts. The river's steady pulse slackens but never stops. And if it's not the garden's guilt trip about neglect, it's the steps demanding to be shoveled. When the wind blows, trampolines traverse neighborhoods. When it rains, mudslides street county roads. Everyone else seems to be either a retired rodeo star or a former Olympic athlete. Whether it's winter or fire or smoke that isolates us from the rest of the world, living in what times feels like truly the end of the road confers a frontier feeling, an invitation to live boldly on the front lines. But despite all this bigness of landscape, of personality, of opportunity, what I've found is that life here blooms in the liminal spaces, the tiny transitional moments, the quiet private offerings of time and place that position us to best absorb the Methow's secret sauce. I'm talking about chance encounters in the backcountry, newborn fawns curled up together under a pile of irrigation pipes, sharing book recommendations mid-stacks at the library, that first sighting of Orion in the fall, helping dig a stranger out of a ditch, a midnight coyote chorus, serving on a committee with people you don't know, seeing the northern lights. These moments exist in the margins of our dominant lives, our families, our work, our friendships, the things we define ourselves by. They take us by surprise, a burst of beauty or awe or unexpected camaraderie. By themselves, these moments are inconsequential, but strung together, they become integral elements to our sense of belonging to this place. We stretch our hearts and minds when we slip into the fringe spaces between the groups we're comfortable in, the familiar places, the regular patterns of our daily lives, the things we're used to seeing and doing. There's magic in these margins. We all have our own paths that led us to this valley, and we all have our own ways of getting oriented within it. For me, the way I've found my place in this community has been by saying yes, by getting involved, by participating. My neighbor, Donna Martin, was born and raised here on a homestead up the Chiwak. When I asked Donna about her life in this valley, she tells me stories, not all of them fit for public consumption. But one theme appears again and again. Honey, when people saw something that needed to be done, they just did it, Donna says. When they made up their mind to do it, they stayed with it until it was done. Of all the legacies the homesteader generations have left us, this one seems to be the most enduring, the get her done ethic. Look around this valley and you'll see organizations and systems that enrich all of our lives. Look around this valley and you'll see the people responsible for them. These people were and are doers, the Millers, John and Ray Mahays, the Brandenburg, Shirley House, the Schmeckles, the Mendros, and so many others. Almost without exception, the hallmark projects and institutions in our valley have been achieved not by government or civic entities, but by individual community members, usually through collaboration, quite often by disparate groups of people working together to reach a common goal. So the question for all of us younger and newer people is, at what point do we become these doers, these people who have historically made this place what it is? We're pretty solid when it comes to rallying in the face of adversity. Level 2 evacuation, friends and neighbors show up with trucks to help you load up. Mudslide fills your ground floor, a team will help shovel you out. Need a kidney? Chances are someone in the community has one for you. Horses escaped again? The family down the road already has them corralled. We kind of rock it in challenging times. But what about what we're doing in these COVID notwithstanding comfortable, convenient times? Because those are the times we need to think about, not just meeting emergency needs, but anticipating future ones and being players in the solutions. For years or decades or generations, we've watched ordinary people around us do extraordinary things for the good of our community. At what point do the rest of us need to step up and become these people? Our heritage in the Methow Valley lies with the lessons the people before us have gifted us. Although it has taken far too long, we are finally beginning to acknowledge what we should have learned long ago from the original inhabitants of this valley, the Methow people, that we belong to the land, that we are each a part of it. Now, too, I'd say that we need to consider what the homesteader generations have taught us. that we belong to the community, that we are a part of it. As we shift our perception of our responsibility to the land, we can also think about how we perceive our responsibility to the people who live on it, as stewards not just of this place, but of the ethics and organizations that keep us hooked on it. Thanks.
Wow. Great. Feel free to fill that chat box with wow. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. Some of the things that are going to stick with me for the next 12 months are that idea of magic in the margins and the inconsequential moments that are the deepest ones. And then thinking about that gift from those who have been here before us, both of the Methow people and the homesteaders, and what they both have to teach us. So thank you for filling my head already with many good thoughts. You mentioned the get her done attitude that is pervading here in the Methow Valley. And that's such a wonderful segue to our next speaker. Kavi Mitchell is a self-described go-getter. And when I said to someone in the office that was how Kavi described himself, my coworker, Johnny Duguay, said, absolutely. So I am about to welcome Kavi here to the stage. Kavi is a 2017 Liberty Bell High School graduate who graduated from high school here after his family moved here to fill us all with goodness at Rocking Horse Bakery in Winthrop. He, in his time in high school, became one of the youngest, if not perhaps the youngest, members of the volunteer fire department in Winthrop, and became a very beloved member of that community. He's gone on to study at the University of Montana, and he spends his summers and now falls, as the fire season extends, fighting wildfire. This past summer, Kavi was back home, but not for the usual college summer. He was back home working as a firefighter, helping to keep his home community safe. I've gotten to see Kavi through the years. He's a neighbor down the road of mine, and he has this beautiful puppy who's now an adult dog. And I've never seen someone care so much about their dog and train him so miraculously well and walk him so well. So I know Kavi has a good heart. We asked Kavi to be a speaker tonight because we know he has an interesting perspective on this valley. He's seen it from the eyes of a child moving here. He's seen it from the eyes of a teenager growing up here. He's seen it from the eyes of a college student reflecting on it from afar. And now he's seen it from the eyes of a firefighter working the lines to protect his home. So welcome to Kavi Mitchell.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Just give me 1 second to get all set up. Okay. What the Methow means to me. Well, to start, I struggled with this way more than I thought I would when Sarah and Daniel and all the Methow Conservancy asked me to speak. I thought it was going to be super straightforward and struggled with it. I actually spent multiple weeks trying to figure out kind of what I was going to say and how I could sum up everything. So this is what I came up with is opportunity. To me, if you had to sum the Methow up into something, some small package that you could then present to the rest of the world, it would be opportunity. The Methow gives you tons of opportunity. And for me, I'm going to talk about some of the opportunity that it is given. So education, I'm a Liberty Bell graduate, as Sarah said, was lucky enough to graduate from Liberty Bell in 2017, and then move on to doing higher education in Colorado and Montana. And the Valley was really, really fundamental in driving that. Liberty Bell gave me a good baseline for working with a small community and becoming impactful and feeling like your voice really meant something. So then I took that to Colorado and studied at Fort Lewis College for 2 years and got to do things, join clubs, ride mountain bikes, and make a whole bunch of awesome friend groups there. But still with that fundamental idea that the Valley had given me this opportunity to pursue education and enjoy education. Now that's left me in Montana, and I'll be graduating from the University of Montana. Hopefully it would be May, I guess it would be the beginning of May, with a degree in natural resources. And that will segue into kind of more, I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that came up in a little bit. Family, as Sarah said, my family lives here in the Valley, and I'm lucky enough to have a sister, a mom, and a dad, and then a lovely puppy. And the Valley has always been home to me. It's been part where my family's considered home and where they've made home base since 2010. And so no matter where I go to school or where I travel, family, the Valley has always brought me back, and allowed me the opportunity to reconnect with my family. It may that be like going on hikes or just crashing on the couch because I need some sense of security after working crazy amounts of shifts, or a long extended fire season. Recreation, Valley, we all know, most of us know that the Valley has a huge recreation possibilities. So for me, it gave me the opportunity to pursue all these recreational items. I love to hike and bike, and I assume, since most of you are interested in land and land management, that you too like to pursue outdoor recreation. So tying it back to that idea of opportunity, the Valley allows us to recreate and gives us the opportunity to recreate in many different forms. May that be hiking or biking on some of the roads around here, or if you're just exploring Sun Mountain or the Patterson Lake area, or even Pearrgen Lake, and exploring all those trails. Not to mention all the skiing in the winter. Holy cow, we have so much opportunity to pursue Nordic skiing and all of that. And then also the amazing thing, skiing and backcountry in the Cascades. So recreation, the Valley has given me an opportunity to recreate, and I take that and I've moved with that. And that's really fundamentally become a part of who I am. So I spend a lot of time recreating, and the Valley helped form that love. And in employment and volunteering, I started jumping into working with some amazing nonprofits and different organizations within the Valley. So some of those would be, I got to work with Methow Trails growing up and grew Nordic Trails. And that opportunity was amazing. Not many people can say that they got to learn how to run a piston bully at the age of 15 and 16. And I can say that I got to do that because I lived in this small, amazing town where the directors and the other members of that organization took an interest in me, and they were like, hey, do you want the opportunity to work with us? And I jumped on it. And so I feel very lucky that I got a chance to learn a little bit about trails and trail maintenance. And then in high school, I jumped into fire and EMS and got the opportunity to work with the Rural Fire Department, Okanagan County Fire District 6, and Aero Methow. And those two organizations were amazing. They opened their arms to me, and I felt like a family member. Aero Methow offered me internships that I was then able to tie into my academics, and the fire department offered me a safe space to go from a 16-year-old all the way up through high school. And so I got to do fire and structural firefighting growing up, and that helped with just forming discipline and an interest in community and your willingness to be part of an organization. And again, not an opportunity that everybody gets. In big cities, you don't have that opportunity. And so lucky and very thankful that the Methow, being a small interconnected group, gave me the opportunity to work in all these different avenues. And then most recently, I've been working for the Forest Service for the last couple of years. Been working, and the Forest Service community has been amazing. I am able to go there every day, show up to work, and always feel supported and embraced, and I can ask any questions that I need. And all the other disciplines in the Forest Service, maybe the trail staff or the recreational staff, or even the other fire staff, they're all willing to just help you and help you grow and move you into a bigger person, or a better person, excuse me. And then the bakery was a huge part of what the Methow means to me. And so I was lucky enough to grow up with my parents owning Rocking Horse Bakery, and got an interest and a love of food, and got to meet all these amazing community members that came in, and we could exchange awesome things. They told great and amazing stories as I worked there, and really felt embraced. And then moving to fire. Fire in the Valley has been crazy. We, as you all have probably witnessed in some case, had 2 very large fires this season. And I had the opportunity to work through the Forest Service on both those fires. I've been working for the Forest Service for 4 years in the Methow Valley. And so fire and the opportunity to grow knowledge and my firefighting ability has been very strong in the Valley. I got to this year, I worked with helicopters and bulldozers and managed other engines. And I would say that was largely to do with the fire community in the Valley and the Forest Service and how they run things. Just an opportunity that's not given to most people my age, to be able to not just have a little impact on fire suppression in your hometown, but to really truly get to do some important decision making and feel like you're supported in whatever you decide to do. And then to end, landscape and beauty. We all know the Methow Valley has amazing landscapes, amazing beauty. So just tie it back to the idea of opportunity. The Methow Valley gives us an opportunity to enjoy the beauty and the scenery. Thank you. That is what the Methow means to me.
Awesome, Kavi. Thank you so much. I feel like every Liberty Bell High School student at just this time of year needs to hear that presentation at that moment when they're wondering, is this small town really, going to give me enough, or I'm so, tired of this place. I feel like if they all sat down and heard that, wow, they might see this place in a slightly different light. So I appreciate that very much, and I'm sure they will. And your images of the opportunities that are here. I love thinking about the Valley as a place of opportunity, and the idea that your voice means something in a place like this. And I hope yours does. And I also hope that this community is grateful for the work you did this summer. So thank you. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, we've heard this kind of theme throughout both of our two thoughts thus far, that what you do here and who you are and how you stand here, to quote a William Stafford poem, matters in the Methow Valley. And I think that's really true. It's definitely one of the things I love most about this place. And when I think about people who taught me that here, I definitely immediately think of Dave and Marilyn Sabold. So I get technically that this is called 4 thoughts, and you're seeing a screen with 2 speakers in it. And if you're doing math, that adds up to 5. And it's not at all to suggest that Dave and Marilyn are going to have to give 1 thought, because anyone who knows them knows they each definitely have their own thoughts, and both of which are worthy. So it's 4 thoughts with an asterisk, because when we thought of asking one of them, we couldn't imagine not hearing from the other. There are certain couples in this valley that you say as one name, and Dave and Marilyn are one of those teams, I think, around here. So for many of us, I was thinking about this today, for many of us, Dave and Marilyn are among the first people we might have met when we moved here. It was certainly true for me and my family. And I can't figure out why that is, because they're not like the flashiest people on the corner, waving a sign welcoming you. They're rather quiet and humble. And yet when you get here, most people at some point will be like, oh, have you met the Sabolds? Or you'll just be invited to the Sabold's house, or you'll see them at the farmer's market or something like that. They're just fixtures of this place. They have this uncanny ability to just appear and make you feel welcome. If you've ever attended our cider squeeze, then you have enjoyed Dave and Marilyn's hospitality and their wonderful piece of ground that they care for on the East County Road, just down the road from the plant nursery that they ran for, I can't do the math, but from 1975 to 2002, that is a long time of growing plants. Gardner Gardens was what it was called when it was in their care, now Wild Hearts Nursery. Since they've quote unquote retired, which does not seem like a fair word to use when you think of how busy Dave and Marilyn are, they have decided that that means they grow an abundance of food in their gardens. They volunteer with countless organizations, and they do this important but really intangible work of threading people together and making connections. It's amazing how many people they know and how they remember everything about them. So we asked them to be a forethought speaker together, because quiet though they might appear, we just know they have something important for us to hear from their more than 5 decades in the Methow Valley. So welcome, Dave and Marilyn.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll drink to that. This is some cider.
Right.
Yeah. It's not Dutch courage.
Right. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, this is we'll have some stories about connection. But one of the things that so many of us have enjoyed is the plaque at Washington Pass with the William Stafford poem. Our friends Curtis and Sheila thought that maybe we needed a refreshing type of plaque instead of the usual lichen fungus analogy type of thing. So we're going to read this together, and I'll start out. Sometimes you look at an empty valley like this, and suddenly the air is filled with snow.
That's the way the whole world happened. There was nothing, and then.
But maybe sometime you will look out, and even the mountains are gone. The world becomes nothing again. What can a person do to bring back the world?
We have to watch it and look at each other. Together, we hold it close and carefully save it, like a bubble that can disappear if we don't watch out.
Please think about this as you go on. Breathe on the world.
Hold out your hands to it. When mornings and evenings roll along, watch how they open and close, how they invite you to the long party that your life is.
We've enjoyed a nice long party in the Methow, 49 and a half years. We came here when the river was flooding. We had to ford through a couple inches of rain,
Flooding.
river over top of the highway. And it was also the year that the highway opened. So one of the things that I like is the title of this book. Can you see that? This is a Smiling Country. I think Sally's on as one of our listeners here. And the title comes from Owen Wister. Did you read that?
Here was a smiling country. Oops. Winning the Heart at Sight
By Owen Wister.
by Owen Wister.
So we really like living here. We brought our infant daughter over. She was 5 months old, and we had a chance to heal and grow from our Seattle experience. I was in academics and it didn't suit me, so we thought we better do something different. Both of us, why don't you tell about why?
Yeah. So I came over here from the big city and the sirens and stuff going every night, just making it hard to sleep. Anyway, I came over here to raise my family in a quiet, loving place. And it came to be able to express the art that was in me. I knew I had the abilities. I just needed the space and the inspiration.
We both grew up in the Bay Area. I lived in the Santa Clara Valley. And that time, the Chamber of Commerce called it the Valley of Heart's Delight. There were orchards between the towns. There were discrete towns, and they would bloom in the spring. But then it became Silicon Valley, got all paved over. So that was kind of my inspiration to, when I got here, to try to keep some open space, because I really missed that when it went. When we came here, we found kindred spirits and the old timers. They accepted us. We were back to the land hippies, but it was okay. We had different cultures and different politics, but we knew to keep our mouths shut for a while. And
As we learned the culture.
we learned the culture. We volunteered at Du Bois Ranch out in Wolf Creek and grew potatoes and wheat with the kids. These were court ward kids with bad family situations or got in trouble. When we lived there, our neighbors were some Methow pioneers, Ed and Hazel Kuykendall. Ed had mushed huskies up into the azurite mine in the wintertime with supplies, and a wonderful gardener. And they taught us a lot about not only the culture of the Methow, but also how to garden. One time, Hazel gave us some plant starts, and she said something I didn't understand. She said, "Don't thank me." We thanked her. She said, "Don't thank me or they won't grow." So that was, I kind of wondered what that meant. And I kind of think what it meant was that there was such a culture here that you didn't have to reciprocate every time somebody did something for you. You didn't have to pay them. You didn't have to trade. You didn't even have to say thank you. You're just part of the culture. It wasn't like, it was kind of like what goes around comes around. It was the first real practical application of that concept I'd ever experienced. So we tend to think of our valley as a paradise. Those of us who own a home or a car and have money in the bank tend to forget that many of the old timers here struggle to pay their rent or their property taxes. We live in two cultures. Daniel Center interviewed Jennifer Sherman. She's the author of Dividing Paradise. She's a sociologist who studies rural communities in the West. She lived here and interviewed hundreds of people. She volunteered at Cove and at Room 1. And so she could learn about the class system here. She was really impressed with the solid support system that we have going here compared to other areas that she studied. Many of us already contribute to the Housing Trust, Cove, Room 1, and the Conservancy. And Jennifer appreciates that. We're really setting a model for how to do things in a rural valley, as Ashley talked about. But these people, they just don't have the education or the money. And it's the only home that they know. They used to hunt and fish and ride snowmobiles. And they kind of no longer feel that the community includes them. So after reading, and also they're kind of reticent about asking for help from the agencies or from the government. So Jennifer talks about how what we can do is relate in a more personal way. We can give money, and that's good. We need to keep on doing that. But we need to make a human connection. So I kind of played with that a little bit. I was over at the doctor's office in the waiting room, and everybody kind of keeps to themselves. And I was going to pick up a magazine, but I thought, no, I'm going to see if I can get something going here. So I turned to the retired logger next to me. We made some small talk, and this went on for a little while. And then he informed me that if we would have just logged these forests, we wouldn't have these fires. So we didn't, I didn't really choose to engage in forestry practice discussion at that point. But I did volunteer that if we could thin out some of the trees around the habitation areas, we could turn them into a biochar, like the biochar project is proposing. And that could make some money from it, could improve agricultural soils. He didn't say anything to that, but an old timer across said, "Hey, that sounds like a good idea." But then they called me for my shot. So but it looked like we were starting to get something going there. So these little things I think are very important. Why don't you talk a little bit about our neighborhood?
Okay, we have two new families have moved into our neighborhood. And so what we've been doing is sharing our love of the valley with them. And, so we had them over for side rings and encouraging the kids playing in the pond. It's been really wonderful. Well, we would look out when they were not there, one of the neighbors, and their light was just like a beacon coming from their house. So we talked to them about it, and my darn, she says, thank you so much for telling me that, because I would never know. I was not there. So I had no idea that this light was shining and, ruining the evening skies for catching stars. So it's the kind of thing, that you really need to take a little responsibility to share your love and concerns for the valley with the new people that you bump into.
We love the reconciliation that's happening with the original Methow people. It's wonderful that Conservancy could facilitate the return of that large chunk of land. I've floated that in a inner tube, and it's just like wilderness. You don't hear any road noise, you don't see any houses. And it's wonderful that this can be returned to the people that lived here.
We really have enjoyed the powwows that we've been to, and it really introduced us to another culture, the Indian culture. The men would come in with their big salmons above their heads and dance around, and all we people that were there, we're used to eating on time, right? So our mouths were salivating as the salmon passed by and the smells. And then the women had to do their offerings of the bitter roots, and so it was fascinating to see this different culture being offered to us and shared so freely.
We had the opportunity of gift giving, and Craig Bolza was part of the group that welcomed the tribal folks back to the valley. They met for 5 years in Glenn Schmeckel's room, and they decided that they would throw a powwow for the Methow people. And part of the gift giving was, Craig wondered, what do you give to a tribal elder that really means something? And he thought, oh, I know, it's going to be the old family rifle that's been in the family for so long. So he presented the rifle to the tribal elder. And
It brought tears to our eyes.
he spoke so eloquently, and it's been a good reconciliation. It's ongoing. So I'd say that Methow Conservancy has done a really good job of bringing together people and good conservation practices. Sarah Brooks draws standing room only crowds to the conference rooms when there's a National Land Trust rally, explaining how to inspire people to do the right thing for the land. I tend to take the valley for granted. I figured isn't this the way everyone lives? But it's not. When I travel and come back, I realize that we've got something real special going on here.
Last year, Sarah Burns asked what we can do for this place. Well, Bill Stafford answers it with his poem, but it just inspired me to, when I take my morning walks, I've been walking, for 10, 15 years along the river. Well, now these are all divided up into little pieces. And I need to introduce myself to some of these people because I don't bump into them, to ask them if it's all right if I walk along the edge of the river. And I'm used to follow the deer trail. Well, some of the fences have caused the deer to go down the banks instead of being able to walk up on the flat. So it's a good thing to be conscious of what needs to be addressed in the valley still.
Okay, let's finish off with let's reread the second half of the Bill Stafford poem. Would you read that?
Yep. What can a person do to help bring back the world? We have to watch it and then look at each other. Together, we hold it close and carefully save it like a bubble that can disappear if we don't watch out. Please think about this as you go on. Breathe on the world. Hold out your hands to it. When mornings and evenings roll along, watch how they open and close, how they invite you to the long party that your life is. Thank you.
All right, take it away, Sarah.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh. So wonderful to hear your thoughts, and I'm so grateful that we got to hear them together.
Well, that was fun.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And so appropriate that you all picked William Stafford, and in particular that poem. I think, Dave, you might have introduced me to that particular poem. And I remember you loving that line about the long party your life is. And whenever I read that poem, I actually do think of you too. And you do an excellent job of modeling how to live a long life that feels like a good party. So thank you for being those great role models. I know I'm not supposed to say thank you. I just learned, because this is a place where we can just expect such goodness of each other, but that's a lesson from your talk I'm gonna have to work on for a bit. But a wonderful segue in that you shared both these really authentic experiences and then combined them with beautiful poetic words. That is something that I know our next and last forethought speaker, Soleil Kelley, will do for us tonight. We asked each of our speakers to not submit a bio to us. That wouldn't be very forethought-like. But instead to give us some words that they would use to describe themselves. And here's what Soleil wrote to us. Methow raised and returned, musician turned marketer, adventure seeker. So you can already imagine why we chose Soleil. He clearly has a way with words. And I will just add as an aside that when I wanted to dig in a little deeper so I'd have something smart and clever to say about Soleil beyond why we chose him, I found this blog that he kept on the internet. You gotta love the internet for digging up old things. And I believe in 2015 or so, he wrote the best blog post I have ever read. And I'm not gonna give away the secret as to why it's so good, so you all go find it, about bullet points in presentations and how to use them well. And it is brilliant and clever. And I will say that Kavi used them perfectly in his presentation, according to Soleil. So we'll just let you go find that brilliant blog post. But it reassured me at that moment that we had picked absolutely the right person to be our closing forethought speaker tonight. He has a super interesting perspective on this place. As his own words describe, he grew up here and he's come back to raise his kids here. He's seen a valley change, and hopefully he's seeing some of the core things he loves about this valley never change. He's now a member of the remote worker community, and he spends his working hours doing some pretty creative marketing work for a tech company. But I also know from talking with him in preparation for this event that he spends a lot of his non-working times thinking about rural change, thinking about this valley and the future, always sneaking in still a good adventure here and there. He told me that he would only say yes to our invitation to speak if he spent a few days thinking about it, and if he felt like he could come up with something worthwhile. That was the word he picked, worthwhile to say. He ultimately said yes. I'm absolutely certain he has something worthwhile to say, and I can't wait to hear it. So here's our last forethought speaker tonight, Soleil Kelley.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sarah. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to hear all the perspectives from everybody. I think, like Ashley and Kavi, I'm gonna start with a little bit of a confession. I watched the Forethoughts last year for the first time, and for many days following that, I kept replaying that question to myself. What does the Methow really mean to me? I would think of a few things here and there as I went about my day to day. But I eventually concluded that, gosh, that's really hard to choose just one thing. It's hard to put in words such a meaning. It was really wonderful to hear everybody's perspective tonight on that. So when I received this invitation, to speak, I was admittedly a bit intimidated, as others have shared. Anyway, so it's just great to be here, and what an opportunity. What I really appreciated is that hard things really force you to think and to commit. They teach you something about yourself and the way you communicate, and that you learn from others. They make you grow, even if it's only just a little bit. So challenge accepted. What does the Methow mean to me? Thank you. So my lived experiences here really play out in 3 chapters. So as you alluded, I get to dig into this question, and I've asked myself this single, like, is there a single word that could characterize my experiences, my observations or learnings from each of these chapters? And these 3 words that I've really distilled down are improvisation, which has been spoken to about tonight, impression, and finally intention. So in chapter 1, that's effectively my childhood in the 90s, I learned the significance of improvisation and what that would mean to me. And specifically the magic moments and the outcomes that can be found when you surrender to a little bit of uncertainty for not knowing how you're going to get from A to B. Stories have a beginning, an A, and an end B. The middle, in my opinion, is really fertile ground for just magic, really, to happen and lead to a really great B. I must have been 13 or 14 years old when I learned a couple of frameworks for the guitar. I have it right here with me even. I'm not going to play a song though. That they forever changed the way I thought about improvisation. The utility of the pentatonic or 5-note scale was one, and the second was how to turn chord progressions into the numbers 1 through 7. Props to Mr. Evans and my band teacher and Terry Hunt for those. The R&B festival was always a highlight of my summers for all its sun and just hours upon hours of musicians letting loose on stage. For a while in my mid-teens, I would join the likes of local musicians. I called them the Keiths. This is Wolfman and Zippy for Friday night open mics at the Schoolhouse Pub in Winthrop. Confined to this little tiny stage inside by the door, by the alley, and sipping root beer, all I had were these couple of frameworks and a tiny bit of understanding about the blues. A song would count in with a tempo, a key, and a few numbers called out, the arrangements of the song. And all I knew was that there was going to be a lot of making things up as I went. And we would end at some point, somehow harmoniously all together on the same page. It was raw, it was loud, it was unconfined, and it always concluded with applause, which is lovely. So who wouldn't love that moment of freedom and expression? From these experiences and the countless impromptu jam sessions with friends, even as recent as several weeks ago, I learned how you can sometimes just start with something, anything, then listen, anticipate changes, find balance with the others you are with, and explore the opportunities to evolve or pivot, or sometimes just end when it feels like it's the right thing to do. Of course, I'm speaking in terms of songs here, but the improvisational mindset, I believe, extends well beyond music and can expose paths or options you hadn't otherwise planned for. This has happened many times in my life. Looking around, people in this valley are generally very crafty and creative and entrepreneurial, resourceful and giving. They improvise a lot of those middle sections of those stories, and it leads to really amazing outcomes. I couldn't go personally, but take, for example, last year, this notion of let's just have a concert with people float on floaty things in Patterson so everybody can stay socially distanced. I think that kind of way about thinking, it takes creativity and improvisation. I just love that. In chapter 2, the 20 years of holiday visits with family and adventures with friends that followed my upbringing, the valley's undeniably beautiful landscape, which has been spoken about so much, was just a constant reminder of the impression it actually had on me as a child. Beyond the memory pathways in my brain, I'm convinced it must be physically ingrained into the iron in my blood and the color in my eyes. As you all undoubtedly know, there is truly something special here, recognized first by native Methow inhabitants, and now most certainly by every single one of us and the residents passing through this wonderful place. One's eyes can't escape the pull of its magnetic vistas, my mother included. I was born just on the other side of the pass near the Cascade River, and not 2 months later was on the back of my mother on a 30-mile backpacking trip from Diablo Lake up and over the misnomered Easy Pass with 3 of my older brothers alongside. Already enamored with the Cascades, when she drove over the pass and into the valley for the first time, she marveled at those 1,000-foot cliffs of Goat Wall. Still thinking about those craggy peaks surrounding Washington Pass, she said to herself, and she tells the story to us sometimes, I want to live here one day. And I'm certain that the experience conjured up the impression of her own upbringing in the likewise glacially carved valleys of the Northern European Alps. It took several years for our family to eventually settle here, first in Twist, and then eventually in Mazama. But I think about that moment often whenever I round the corner coming down into the upper valley from the pass. That spot, along with the thousands of other equally amazing ones around the Methow, indeed leave lasting impressions and deep connections to the land. And I am sure that every single one of you here has many of those magic spots. In chapter 3, my return to being here full time, I'm currently experiencing life as a working parent and trying to be an engaged community member. It's just what we do. What I've seen upon my return is profound. It's progressive for a community of our size. The intentional way people, whether new to the Valley or not, full or part-time, young or old, come together to support and care for each other and seek solutions to the challenges that afflict our community, while ensuring everyone still has access to good old time down by the river, in the mountains, or along the trails. I think that's truly, truly remarkable. If it takes a village to raise a child, and it certainly does here, I'd argue it takes a child to raise this village we call the Methow Valley. For who else in the long run would benefit from the fact that growth and development is measured and thoughtful, that the fragility of our environment is acknowledged yet recovered, that the vulnerability of our homes and economy to wildfire is palpable yet mitigated, and that the sustainability of the way of life of every person in this valley is considered. Our children and all our guests henceforth will inherit the output of the intention we all put into every facet of this gem. So be it well. These words are in sum a bit about what the Methow means to me: to act with intention for the good of the whole, for posterity, to feel the impressions of this valley in your body and your emotions and that smile on your face, and to envision your destination, yet seed to where life's improvisations may eventually take you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you tonight.
Wow. Absolutely worthwhile, Soleil. Thank you. That's one I want to spend time listening to over and over again and grab little nuggets from each time. What I loved about it was it summed up what Four Thoughts is, which is a whole lot of improvisation, right? We don't know how we're going to get from A to B, but we know we start with 4 or 5 great people in the community and hear from them. It leaves a lasting impression, and it takes real intention from each of you speakers tonight. So thank you for giving us so much to think about, Soleil, and thank you to all of our speakers for giving us so much. Let's make sure we give them a huge round of applause. And I think if I'm left with any lasting impression from this year's round of thoughts, it is about taking the time to enjoy this place, find that lifelong party here, and those moments in the margin and those impressions and improvisational adventures, and embrace them. And yet also, as Soleil reminded us, live with great intention and step up and say yes and take those opportunities or make opportunities for others here. And I look forward to thinking about that as I go into my New Year's ruminations. So thank you all. And I will turn it back over to Daniel for the last thoughts of the night.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to Ashley, Kavi, Marilyn, Dave, and Soleil for tackling this challenge with such creativity and bravery, and providing us with so much inspiration in a year that has been filled with so much uncertainty. Each of you have demonstrated how powerful it can be when we gather together to hear from and discuss unique and diverse perspectives. This year, we have been so amazed at the level of involvement this community has demonstrated in having some really tough conversations around things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, rural gentrification, and the implications of climate change. In these times, it feels like change is the new constant. but change doesn't mean that we have to lose the things that we collectively value. I think Whitman College professor Donald Snow gave us the roadmap for preserving our values in the midst of rural change in his essay, Round the Next Bend, when he said, "This kind of careful and deliberate honoring of cultural, architectural, and ecological heritage that focuses on quality, not just on quantity, has been key to managing growth. Honoring this heritage and questioning a community's shared past and present must be public acts out in the open for all to see, discuss, and contribute to. We have to bring the darkness to light. We have to learn how to discuss openly and productively our divisions, the old wounds and old animosities that have kept people apart. I like to think that what we are doing here tonight is bringing light to the darkness. So with those words in mind, we will end tonight's program, and I look forward to being present, engaged, and together with all of you who care for the Methow Valley in the year to come at one of our events or at an event of another organization here who works so hard to make this a better place. And many thanks to all of you who make all of this work and this place possible. Safe and happy holidays, everybody. Have a good night.